At 6:17 on Friday evening, Eleanor Vale placed a $250,000 check in front of Owen Brooks and told him the ranch would be sold on Monday. The money could replace what the single father had borrowed, protect his home, and let him walk away clean. 12 teenagers watched through the office glass. Owen pushed the check back. By sunrise, the ranch workers would call him brave. Before Monday, his daughter would call the same decision a betrayal, because the ranch Owen was saving had already cost her something he had never asked permission to spend. 10 hours earlier, Owen was standing in the east barn with one hand beneath a nervous gelding's jaw and the other raised toward a boy who had stopped 3 steps inside the door. "You don't have to touch him," Owen said. "Just let him see where you are." The boy was 16, narrow-shouldered, and knew enough to veil ridge that he still watched every adult for the moment. Kindness became a debt. He kept both hands in his coat pockets. The gelding breathed against Owen's wrist. "He looks mad," the boy said. Owen told him the gelding was uncertain, not angry. The boy studied the animal a moment longer. Same face. That almost made Owen smile. Sometimes, outside, a black sedan bearing the Vale emblem passed the paddock toward the main house. Eleanor had been gone 11 years. The boy asked whether its passenger owned the ranch. "The estate owns it now," Owen said. The distinction meant nothing to the boy. "What's the difference?" Owen lowered his hand from the gelding. "Today, I'm not sure." By 8 o'clock, all 9 employees had gathered in the tack room. Saddles lined one wall. Photographs of children beside horses covered the other. The county called Vale Ridge a youth mentoring program with equine support. Owen called it a place that offered a quiet hour without first demanding an explanation. Eleanor stood beneath the oldest photograph. Dressed for a meeting but wearing leather boots, a legal folder rested against her arm. She did not begin with her father's death. Everyone in the room already knew. The estate has accepted an offer for the western acreage, the main house, and the south barns, she said. The closing documents must be signed by 6 Monday evening. No one spoke. The news left the room so quiet that Luis Ortega, the senior trainer, had to ask what would happen to the east barn. Eleanor confirmed that the buyer's current offer included it, and worried whispers moved among the younger employees. Owen ignored them and fixed his attention on a single word. "Current offer." Eleanor understood the challenge. A transition proposal existed, she explained, but it was not final. Owen looked directly at her. "How many jobs would it keep?" 6, Eleanor answered, "out of 9. She gave one restrained nod. "Yes." Owen glanced at the 12 photographs on the schedule board. "And how many kids?" Eleanor's grip tightened slightly on the folder. 8 can remain in the county program here. There were 12 photographs from the current group clipped to the schedule board. Owen looked from the photographs back to Eleanor. "Which 4 did you decide could leave?" Eleanor said she had not selected the participants. "Someone will," Owen replied. The tack room door opened before Eleanor could answer. Tessa Grant, the county coordinator, came in carrying a canvas bag and an expression that made Owen wish she had arrived later. "I just spoke to our risk office," she said. "The estate's policy ends Monday night. If there isn't a replacement policy bound by then, I can't schedule anyone here Tuesday." Luis asked whether that restriction included the 8 placements Eleanor hoped to retain. Tessa's answer was immediate. It included everyone. The room changed. Sale was an argument. Insurance was a locked gate. Beyond the tack room wall, a horse struck the stall door once, then settled. No one inside the room did. Eleanor insisted that the transition proposal included insurance. Tessa corrected her. It included an estimate, not a bound policy. Owen saw the first crack in Eleanor's calm she had not known. Owen asked what the county could do for the other 4 teenagers. Tessa had found 2 placements 40 miles north and a general after-school program for a 3rd. The 4th still had no match. "So one has nowhere," Owen said. Tessa corrected him carefully. "No match yet did not mean no place at all. Monday is 3 days away." "I know what day it is." "Owen?" she replied. Tessa's voice was not unkind. That made it worse. After the meeting, Eleanor asked Owen to stay. The others moved toward the barn aisle, speaking in low voices. Luis paused at the door. Luis warned Owen not to tell anyone to reject the separation paperwork. Owen looked at him. "I haven't." "You will?" Luis said, and left before Owen could answer. Eleanor placed the folder on a workbench and explained that Owen's management agreement was the only contract the buyer refused to assume. "My contract didn't create the debt," Owen said. Eleanor agreed. but the agreement still had 6 years remaining. Along with use of the foreman's residence and an early termination payment, the buyer wanted the land without any of those obligations. Owen had left the foreman's residence after his wife died because Maya could not sleep where every hallway still sounded like her mother. But the housing right remained in his agreement. Owen argued that land could be purchased with an existing contract attached. Eleanor's answer was simple. This buyer would not accept it. Then find another buyer. The estate owes more than the next offer would cover, she replied. There it was, the clean language of money arranging the future. Eleanor opened the folder. Your remaining contract value, housing rights, and termination payment totaled $238,000. She paused, allowing the number to occupy the space between them. I rounded the settlement to $250. Then she slid the check across the workbench. Owen stared at the number. She mistook his silence for offense and clarified that it was neither charity nor payment for his cooperation. Most of the money was already owed to him. The additional amount would spare both sides 6 months in court. I know what it is, Owen said. What happens if I don't release the agreement? Eleanor said the full property sale might fail. Owen caught the uncertainty. Might. She did not soften the alternative. The buyer could sue, and the estate could ask a court to terminate his agreement. While lawyers fought, employee separation payments would be delayed and the youth program would have no insured site. Owen closed the folder. So the only way to save the program is to help you sell it. Eleanor reminded him that the only plan on paper preserved 30 acres, the East Barn, 6 jobs, and 8 placements. That's not the program, Owen replied. That's the part your buyer finds inexpensive enough to tolerate. Eleanor held his gaze. It's the part I have been able to protect. That sentence followed him into the barn. At 10, Owen gathered the staff beside the feed room. Separation packets had arrived by email, and 2 employees had already printed theirs. Owen told everyone to read the documents but not sign before Sunday. Luis folded his packet once and put it in his back pocket. Owen reminded the staff that his agreement could slow the sale. Luis answered from the edge of the group. Slow isn't stop. It gives us time, Owen said. Luis asked the question no one else wanted to voice. Until when? Owen looked toward the arena. 3 teenagers were brushing horses under supervision. Until we have another plan. Luis explained that his wife had an infusion Tuesday. Signing by Sunday secured 6 months of health coverage. If Owen tied up the sale, that money could be tied up with it. Owen lowered his voice. I'm not asking you to give that up. Luis shook his head. You're asking me to wait while you decide whether my option is good enough. Around them, no one moved. Owen said, 48 hours. That's all. Luis studied him. 48 hours belongs to you. The risk doesn't. For the first time that morning, Owen wondered whether Eleanor had already said the same thing in different words. At noon, 14-year-old Maya arrived carrying a poster tube and 2 sandwiches. She had her mother's habit of entering quietly enough to hear the truth before anyone prepared it. She found Owen in the office with ranch accounts spread across the desk. Maya set down the bag. You forgot lunch. Owen claimed he was testing whether crackers were a complete food group. The test has been running for 3 years, she replied. She placed the sandwich beside him and noticed the settlement folder. Maya asked about the folder. Owen described it only as something Eleanor Vale wanted him to sign. The woman with the car. Maya asked. That's one way to identify her. Maya leaned over the desk, but Owen put a hand on the folder. Business, he said. Maya studied his hand covering the folder. Bad business. Complicated business. She accepted the answer, though not happily. Then she tapped the poster tube. I have something too. Owen's phone rang. Tessa's name appeared on the screen. Give me 1 minute, he said. Maya nodded and sat in the chair opposite him. Tessa had found a broker willing to quote the 30-acre program, but the initial premium was nearly twice Eleanor's estimate. A deposit would be required before Monday afternoon. How much? Owen asked. When Tessa told him, he looked at Maya. She was turning the poster tube slowly between her hands. Send it to me, he said. He ended the call. Maya stood. Maya told him to handle the insurance. Owen pointed to her poster tube. You came to show me something. It's not due until Monday, she said. He frowned. What isn't? But she was already at the door. Just ranch stuff, she said, and smiled as if the phrase belonged to both of them. Only after Maya disappeared beyond the cottonwoods did Owen open the banking app. The education account held less than a quarter of what it had 6 months earlier. He had called every withdrawal temporary. First a roof repair, then feed, then the bridge policy that kept the county from suspending the program in March. The ranch had repaid only part of it. He opened Eleanor's settlement again. $250,000 could clear the second mortgage on his house, restore Maya's account, and leave enough to begin again. At 1:15, Eleanor found him measuring the east pasture. Owen told Eleanor the broker's quote exceeded her budget. "I know," she replied. When he asked whether Tessa had called her too, Eleanor corrected him. "She called me first." Owen lowered the measuring wheel, and Eleanor could move money from maintenance reserves, but only after the buyer accepted the carve-out. "Then bind the policy under the estate," Owen said. She explained that if the full sale failed, those reserves would belong to creditors. She could not spend money the estate might not have. "You mean you won't?" Eleanor met his accusation without retreating. "I mean, an executor doesn't get to turn obligation into personal preference." Owen laughed once, without humor. "Your father did." Eleanor's face did not change, but the silence did. She looked toward the main house. "My father left obligations. He was less interested in preferences." It was the first personal thing she had said. Owen asked why she had never returned while her father was alive. Eleanor called the question irrelevant to the policy. "Maybe it is," Owen said. "But you're asking everyone here to trust what you protected," she corrected him. She was asking them to read an offer, not to trust her. "Paper isn't trust." "Neither is asking people to wait because you believe you can produce a better ending," Eleanor replied. He wanted to answer. Instead, he heard Luis's voice. "The risk doesn't—" Eleanor held out the settlement folder. 6:17. After that, "I send the buyer your refusal, and they decide whether to keep negotiating." Why 6:17? Because their counsel is in Denver. It gives them 43 minutes before their office closes. No symbolism. No grand deadline. Just another clock in another office. At 3, Owen took the insurance quote to the community bank. The manager had known Maya since kindergarten, but familiarity did not change the numbers. There would be no additional loan. Owen argued that county payments would resume if the program survived and pointed to his management contract. The manager pointed to the settlement now being offered for that same contract. Then she pushed the quote back across her desk. "Your house is already carrying more than it should, and the education account isn't collateral, but you have treated it like one." Owen promised to replace every dollar. The manager asked with what? He had no answer that did not begin with if. When he returned to Vale Ridge, the afternoon session was ending. Parents and caseworkers waited by the gate. One boy remained beside the east paddock, refusing to get into the county van. Owen approached slowly. Owen mentioned the other program Tessa had found. The boy kicked dust over his boot and said all it offered was basketball. Owen suggested he could learn. "You say that because you don't have to go," the boy replied. Owen looked across the pasture. "That's true." The boy finally raised his eyes. "Are you closing?" Owen should have said he did not know. "Not if I can help it." The promise left his mouth before he measured its weight. At 6, the staff gathered outside the office. No one had been invited. News of the settlement had traveled from the bank, through a spouse, to a cousin who worked weekends in the stable. By the time Eleanor arrived, the number had become $250,000, offered to make Owen leave quietly. Eleanor heard the phrase and looked directly at Owen. "You know that isn't what the agreement says." Owen did know. Owen answered that the agreement still required him to leave. Eleanor said the check paid what the estate owed him. "Then pay it without taking the ranch." "There is no money without the sale," she replied. The 12 teenagers were finishing supper in the activity room behind the office. Through the glass, several watched the adults assemble. Maya stood near the door with her poster tube under one arm. Eleanor placed the check on the desk. "If you sign, the funds can clear Monday morning. The employee transition proposal remains in place, and I can bind the insurance when the buyer approves the carve-out." Owen looked through the glass. One of the younger girls had both palms pressed to it. Beside her stood the boy who did not want basketball. Then Owen saw Maya. She looked frightened, but proud. He imagined signing while 12 teenagers watched him accept money to leave. He imagined the east barn empty, the trails fenced, and the photographs in the tack room packed into a box marked estate property. He pushed the check back. "I'm not selling them for a clean exit." A stable hand exhaled. Someone behind Owen said, "That's right." Eleanor did not raise her voice. "They were never yours to sell." Owen felt the words land. but the room had already chosen its meaning. Louise did not applaud, neither did Maya. She watched Eleanor put the check back into the folder. "Before leaving," Eleanor said quietly, "by letting them call that courage, you are also letting them believe your refusal protects them." Owen held on to the possibility. "Maybe it will." Eleanor called that hope what it was, not an answer. "It's the only one I have tonight," he said. On Saturday morning, employees contacted former donors, parents proposed a fundraiser, and someone tied a Save Vale Ridge sheet to the front fence. Owen removed it because no one had asked the teenagers whether they wanted their program turned into a campaign. It was a boundary he could still recognize when the cost belonged to somebody else. Louise arrived at 11, not dressed for work. He handed Owen his separation election. Louise told Owen he was signing the separation election. Owen reminded him they had discussed waiting until Sunday. Louise corrected him. Owen had chosen Sunday for everyone. The buyer might use departing staff as proof the program could not operate, Owen warned. Louise had already considered that and offered to train whoever remained. He also understood that contesting the sale might delay his health coverage. "And you're still signing?" Owen asked. "My wife and I looked at the risk," Louise said. "We chose." Louise emphasized the last word without raising his voice. "You think I don't care about those kids," he continued. "I do, but caring about one group doesn't turn everybody else into supplies." Owen handed the form back. When Owen offered to deliver the form, Louise took it back. That choice belonged to him too. Louise walked toward the main house. At noon, Maya sat at the kitchen table with the poster tube open. Inside was an acceptance certificate from a 6-week state robotics program and a page showing a Monday deposit deadline. She had been accepted 11 days earlier. Owen had not seen either page. She logged into the education account because the program allowed payment directly from a savings plan. The balance appeared. She refreshed the page, then opened the transaction history. The first withdrawal was labeled roof. The second, feed. The third, coverage. Her father's name appeared beside each one. In a drawer beneath the printer, she found the second mortgage notice. Owen had hidden it under a stack of ranch supply receipts, which meant he had not truly hidden it at all. He had simply relied on her not looking. Maya rolled the acceptance certificate back into its tube. Then she walked the half-mile to the ranch. Owen was in the office with Tessa and Eleanor when she entered. Tessa was explaining that the fourth teenager now had a temporary placement, but transportation remained unfunded. Maya placed the account statement on the desk. Maya kept her eyes on Owen. "Can I talk to my dad?" Tessa stood immediately. Eleanor closed her folder. Owen saw the paper. Owen said her name as soon as he recognized the statement. "You told me the ranch needed a little help." Maya replied. Eleanor and Tessa moved toward the door. "Stay?" Maya said. It was not a plea. It was a decision. Owen waited until the door closed behind Tessa, but Eleanor remained near it. Owen promised he had intended to replace the money. Maya glanced at the settlement folder. With the check, he admitted that had been one option. "You already knew when I would need it." Owen shook his head. "I didn't know you got in, because I didn't want you to say we couldn't afford it." He stepped toward her. "Maya, I would never tell you not to go." She looked down at the transactions. "You made it impossible before I asked." Owen moved around the desk, but she stepped back. Owen tried to explain what the insurance had protected. 12 teenagers, some with nowhere similar to go. Maya heard the part he was avoiding. "So you gave them mine." "It was temporary," he said. She held up the statement between them. "You gave them something that belonged to both of us. Then you let me thank you for it." The office went completely still. Owen said her mother would have understood why the ranch mattered. The moment he said it, he wanted it back. Maya's face closed. "Mom isn't here to agree with you." She put the robotic certificate beside the bank statement. "The deposit is due Monday at noon. Don't fix it without telling me how." Then she left. Owen did not follow. For once, he understood that following would only be another way of refusing to let her choose the distance. Eleanor remained by the door. Owen told Eleanor she could call him a hypocrite. She refused. He looked at her, almost asking for the punishment. "You already know what you did," Eleanor said. "A label would only make it easier." He looked at the empty space where Maya had stood. I kept thinking I could put it back before it became a loss. That is how my father explained every absence. He would repair it before anyone was allowed to call it damage. Owen turned toward her. Eleanor looked through the office glass at the activity room. When I was 23, he paid off my graduate loans and sent the receipt instead of coming to my mother's funeral. I returned the money. For years, I thought that was the bravest thing I had ever done. Owen asked whether returning the money had been brave. Eleanor looked down at the folder. It was easier than admitting I still wanted him to come. She picked up the settlement folder. Money can be used to avoid responsibility. Refusing it can do the same thing. She left Owen with the statement and the certificate. By Saturday evening, the buyer had reviewed Owen's refusal. Their response was 4 sentences long. Without a release of his agreement, they would withdraw the 30-acre carve-out and purchase only after the estate resolved the contract. The separate program would not be funded during litigation. The plan Owen had rejected was now worse. On Sunday morning, all 9 employees received copies of the buyer's response. Luis read his beside the east barn, then found Owen tightening a loose hinge. Luis asked whether Owen had known the check covered the contract the buyer needed cleared. Owen admitted he had. Then Luis asked whether he had known the 6 transition jobs depended on that release. Eleanor said the full sale might fail. Luis did not let him hide inside her wording. That isn't what I asked. Owen set down the wrench. Owen said he had believed refusing would force the buyer back to the table. Luis waited before asking, and when people called it hush money, Owen looked away. Luis nodded slowly. You let us believe the clean version. Owen defended the narrowest part of his conduct. I never called it a bribe. You didn't have to, Luis replied. By noon, 2 stable hands had applied elsewhere. A 3rd employee asked whether separation money still existed. Tessa suspended Tuesday's schedule because no policy had been bound. Nothing dramatic happened. No gate slammed. No horse bolted. The ranch simply began losing the future one ordinary decision at a time. On Sunday afternoon, Owen brought Luis's form to the main house and heard Eleanor arguing with the estate board. The reduced offer still covered the debt and satisfied a community use provision, she said, when the chair demanded that she describe full liquidation as the only compliant choice. Eleanor refused. Remove me after closing if you need to. Eleanor ended the call and found Owen standing in the doorway. She told him he could have knocked. He placed Luis's form on the desk and asked what removal would mean. An outside administrator would likely sell everything. You never said that. Eleanor answered that her personal risk was not a reason for him to sign. Owen almost laughed at the symmetry. You decided I didn't need to know the price you were paying. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. That's fair. He had expected resistance. Her answer left him with nowhere to push. She opened a drawer and removed an older memorandum. Before her father's death, she had asked the buyer to consider a smaller parcel sale. She had also contacted the county, found the insurer, and identified the 6 positions that could transfer. The dates were all earlier than her first meeting with Owen. Owen realized she had arrived with the transition plan already in motion. Eleanor corrected him. It had been possible, not certain. Then why let everyone think you only came to close us? Because 8 places out of 12 did not feel like something to announce, she said. Owen understood the resemblance between them. We both preferred the version that made our choices easier to live with. Eleanor closed the drawer. Yes, for the first time, Owen saw her not as the person with the power to end Val Ridge, but as someone trying to reduce a loss she could not admit was also hers. That did not make her right. It made the argument honest. They worked in the same room until dark. Eleanor negotiated with the buyer. Owen rebuilt the 6-person staffing plan. Tessa priced transportation, and Luis agreed to train the transition team if his separation coverage remained protected. At 9, the buyer restored the 30-acre option on 2 conditions. Owen had to release his contract by 4 Monday, and the estate had to accept $620,000 less than the full property offer. That left 6 jobs, full separation for 3 employees, 8 local placements, and funded transportation for 4 transfers. The estate board had not approved the reduction. Eleanor could sign, but might be removed or sued. Owen could fight for his original settlement, but the program would disappear during litigation. Refusing the check had saved nothing. Owen asked what the revised plan would do to his settlement. Eleanor gave him the figure only after checking the page. The mandatory portion remained. About $146,000 after deductions and removal of the housing claim. It was enough to restore Maya's account and reduce the mortgage, not enough to erase every consequence. Then Owen asked about his job. Eleanor told him there was no position for him in the transition budget. Owen nodded. Eleanor studied him. She could add an operations position, she said, but only by removing one of the 6 already funded. Owen understood the exchange immediately. No. This time the refusal did not feel heroic. It felt exact. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. The 12 teenagers had no scheduled session, but several families came anyway after hearing the program might close. Tessa moved them to the activity room and told the adults the final meeting would be for employees only. Owen appreciated the boundary. At 10, Maya texted that she was staying with her aunt until evening. She did not ask about the deposit. At 11:30, Owen entered the tack room carrying 3 documents: the original settlement, the revised release, and Maya's account statement. All 9 employees were present. Eleanor stood at the back beside Tessa. Louis sat nearest the door. Owen did not begin with the ranch. The $250,000 check was not hush money, he said. Most of it was compensation the estate owed under my contract. They needed that contract release to complete the sale. No one interrupted. I knew that when I refused it. I believed my agreement could force the buyer to keep the whole program. I did not tell you how uncertain that was. And when people called my refusal brave, I let the misunderstanding stand. The young stable hand stared at the floor. Owen continued. I also used money from my daughter's education account to cover ranch expenses. I took a second mortgage on our house. I told myself both were temporary because I intended to fix them before she had to know. Luis watched him without satisfaction. I called it sacrifice, because that sounded better than admitting I had made other people's choices for them. Owen placed the 3 documents on the table. Here is what is real. We cannot keep all the land. We cannot keep all 9 jobs here. We cannot keep all 12 young people at this location. If I hold my contract, there may be a legal fight, but the insurance ends and the program stops while that fight happens. He turned toward Luis. 3 employees can choose separation with 6 months of health coverage. 6 can choose transition jobs. Luis has asked for separation and agreed to train the transition team for 90 days under a separate paid agreement. Then he faced the rest of the room. No one has to choose today because I want the ranch to look saved. You will each receive the full terms. Tessa will give the 4 families their placement and transportation options. If you want an attorney, take the documents to one. One employee asked whether Owen would stay. Another wanted to know if Eleanor had fired him. Owen answered both questions. No, not as foreman. The 6 funded positions belong to the program, not to my need to remain important. At the back of the room, Eleanor lowered her eyes. Owen signed the release at 11:52. At noon, Maya's robotics deposit remained unpaid. He did not pay it. Instead, he sent her a photograph of the revised settlement amount, the mortgage balance, and the exact sum required to restore her account. Beneath it he wrote, I can repair the account when the funds clear. The deposit is due now. I will borrow from Aunt Rachel only if you want to accept that debt with me. Maya replied 6 minutes later. I want to go. Show me the repayment plan tonight. Owen called her aunt, explained every number, and asked for the short-term loan. At 4, the buyer restored the carve-out. At 5:20, 6 employees had accepted transition positions and 3 had chosen separation. All 4 transferring families received the transportation agreement. 8 teenagers would return to Vale Ridge after the new policy began. At 5:48, the estate board called Eleanor. Owen waited outside the library. Through the door, he heard her say that the reduced sale complied with the community use provision and preserved a viable public benefit. She did not claim it maximized proceeds. At 5:56, the board chair asked whether she understood that her authority would be reviewed immediately after closing. Eleanor confirmed that she did. The chair asked one final question. Was she signing anyway? She looked through the open door at Owen, then beyond him toward the east barn. Yes. At 6 Monday evening, Eleanor signed the sale. No one cheered. The western fields, main house, and south barns were gone from Vale Ridge. The debt would be paid. 30 acres remained around the east barn. 8 places survived there. 4 young people would travel elsewhere. 6 employees stayed. 3 left with terms they had chosen after seeing the whole cost. It was not a rescue. It was a division of loss that no longer depended on one person pretending loss could be avoided. The estate board suspended Eleanor's authority the next morning. She accepted the review without asking Owen to defend her. Owen's settlement cleared 2 days later. He restored Maya's education account first. Though the smaller second mortgage remained, he also gave his sister access to the household accounts until the debt was repaid. Maya had not demanded it. Owen understood that an apology without a changed structure would leave the same power in his hands. After the insurer confirmed coverage, Tessa reopened the program, and Luis began training the transition staff. The boy who hated basketball transferred to a smaller farm program, using transportation funded under the sale agreement. Owen did not promise he would return. 3 weeks later, he came to Vale Ridge to collect the last box from the foreman's office. Eleanor was there, seated at the desk without the legal folders that had once seemed attached to her hand. Owen asked whether the board had finished its review. Not yet, Eleanor replied. When he asked why she was there, she held up his old management agreement. This was still in the estate file. Owen took it. A red stamp crossed the first page. Released. Your name shouldn't be attached to a promise no one can keep, she said. He ran a thumb over the stamp. Eleanor explained that Tessa was forming a transition table, including an independent operations advisor. Owen raised an eyebrow. You offering me a job? No, she replied. The answer came quickly enough to make him smile. The advisor seat would open after an independent review of the ranch accounts. Owen could apply, but the table would decide. Owen asked what happened if they rejected him. Then they say no, Eleanor answered. Owen folded the released agreement. That sounds unfamiliar. For the first time, Eleanor almost smiled. I'm practicing. There was no confession and no promise. Eleanor had given him information, not a future arranged on his behalf. He thanked her and carried the box to his truck. That evening, Maya spread the remaining robotics forms across the kitchen table. They asked about travel, equipment, and whether she wanted the residential or commuter program. Owen read both columns. Owen pointed out that the commuter program cost less. Maya waited. He caught himself. He corrected himself before the suggestion became a decision. What do you want? She looked at the residential option. I want to apply for that, but I want to know what it costs. Owen turned the laptop toward her. He showed her the restored account, the loan from her aunt, the mortgage payment, and what his next job would need to cover. They did not pretend the numbers were comfortable. They made the decision with all of them visible. For years, Owen had believed love meant carrying the cost before anyone could object. That night, he finally understood that love also meant letting the other person see the price and decide whether it was theirs to pay.